glad you could get here. It was very nice to meet Leslie.
Well, I'm glad to be here with you, Harold, once again. I
I'm very happy to meet you. I'm so happy to meet some of your lovely family, because your family life is as inspiring as your career, which is incredibly inspiring, and it's so good to see you again.
Yeah, well, you know, I sort of traced my career in terms of the birth of my children.
Let me introduce you, okay? And welcome in the audience is Seymour Topping, who needs probably no introduction to the audience. He was, of course, managing editor of the New York Times. He was a correspondent with an incredibly illustrious career path, along with his wife, who is a photojournalist. They've worked together on some of the cutting-edge issues that were roiling the earth, and also he's involved with the Pulitzer Prize operation up at Columbia. And he's now got a new book out. I'm going to hold it up quickly here to take a look at it. In May of 2010, and it's called, what's it called now? You want to give the people in the audience the title, Seymour, please?
Well, it's on the front lines of the Cold War, an American correspondent's journal from the Chinese Civil War to the Cuban Missile Crisis and Vietnam.
It's an incredible read. It could not be more incredibly encouraged for you to get involved with this book. It's an amazing book that traces an amazing life's path, and it's a great pleasure and honor, sir, to welcome you to Conversation.
Oh, well, thank you, Harold.
No. I wonder maybe you could share, we're going to wade in, we're going to talk about so many different things, we're going to show some photographs and so forth, but could you share a little bit of your own background, born, raised, a little bit of that, as we did in a previous program, but share that with the audience, then we'll get into the sub and substance of your career path, the events that are encompassed in the book and so forth, but just your own background, please, if you would, born and raised, educated.
Well, I was born in Harlem.
Okay, Harlem, yeah, okay.
In 1921,
okay.
Born of Russian immigrant parents, Jewish parents, and pretty much raised around New York until graduating from high school. I went on to the School of Journalism at the University of Missouri.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I went to Missouri, which has a famous school of journalism.
It does.
The first school of journalism, as a matter of fact, in the United States, because it had great associations with China, and it was my lifelong ambition to become a correspondent in China, and my great hero was Edgar Snow,
yes.
Who wrote this great book about his visit to Mao Zedong when Mao Zedong was off in the boondocks in Shanxi in western China.
Yeah.
The book was, of course, Red Star Over China.
Right, major work, yeah. And you did meet with him.
Yes, and my book has some background in it about my personal life, but essentially it's history, history that I witnessed on the ground. And the approach I took on this book was not an approach of conventional history.
Okay.
It was history on the ground, things that I've witnessed, that I was there, and so on. And I thought that would be a unique contribution in addition to what the conventional historians have written over the years about the Cold War.
Yeah, it's an amazing saga, your life's path. You met with him in China. You were interested in China. You were in Vietnam in 1950.
That's
talking
right.
With Mr.
Yeah, I was in Vietnam and I first arrived in 1950 there after covering the Chinese Civil War for 3 years. I was the first American correspondent into Vietnam. I opened the Associated Press Bureau there in 1950, and then, of course, that was the French Indochina War.
Yes,
which I covered
before Dien Bien Phu.
Before Dien Bien Phu, which was in 1954. And I covered the French Indochina War for 2 years. And then I covered the American War, of course, in Vietnam.
Yeah,
off and on for about 3 years.
And when you said you opened the bureau, was that the bureau for the New York Times, or
no,
were you
that
with a
was
different
the bureau
agency?
for the Associated Press.
Associated Press. Okay,
yeah, I was
see,
with the AP for 10 years, and I joined the New York Times in 1959 when I was in Berlin, covering the Russian crush on Berlin.
We'd need about 20 hours to go into all the nuanced detail. Interesting, incredibly interesting and exciting, worthy of major motion picture adventures of this man's life.
Oh, well, thank
but
you.
no, it's really true. It just reads one thing after another so much. I wonder, important thing personally, when did you and your wife get together? And she's a major photojournalist, and you've worked together in many cases in terms of the overall journalism.
I met my wife in China.
Okay.
She was the daughter of a Canadian diplomat who later became the first Canadian ambassador to China, Chester Ronning, became internationally famous in 1966 when, on behalf of the United States and Canada, he went to Hanoi in an effort to open negotiations to end the Vietnam War. It failed.
What year would that have been?
That was 1966.
That's 66.
Yeah,
okay,
but I met my wife in China in 1947.
In 1947?
Yes, and she was then going to school at Nanking University.
How? Because she was the daughter of a diplomat. He was what? From where now?
From Canada.
From Canada, I see.
Yeah. He was. At that point, he was the chargé d'affaires of the Canadian ambassador. Also, Audrey, while she was going to Nanking University, she also worked part-time for the American military dentist there. And one of the things that she did was talk to Madam Chiang Kai-shek while Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek was getting his false teeth made up. So she had a lot of adventures of her own.
I'm saying the two of you had an incredible adventure. You've had a magnificent family. You say you keep track of things by the family. You've got five daughters?
5 daughters.
5 daughters, yeah.
I keep track because
yes.
Susan was born in Saigon in a French military hospital during the French Indochina War, and then there were 2 daughters born in London and 1 daughter in Berlin. And then 1 born in New York. We have one New
Yorker, right?
One New
Back
Yorker.
in Harlem, maybe, or near to Harlem. Yeah, right. Well, that's a heck of a story, and that you met. It's very romantic in the sense of it being not your normal situation. Raised, you were able to realize your dream of getting involved with the China scene, as it were, very early, pre-Mao, and so forth. You were there. You were pre-Dien Bien Phu in Saigon. You've been ahead of the curve, it would seem, in terms of the historical developments that you were able to cover from that very unique advantage. Advantage point.
Yes, I mean, I covered it for half a century, as a matter of fact.
Yes, congratulations, yeah.
One of the things that is sort of misleading about the title or the term Cold War. The Cold War was really a hot war.
Yeah.
If you take the time between 1950, the Korean War, which I covered in the final defeat of the United States in 1975 in Vietnam, there were over 100,000 American servicemen died during that period of time.
Are you talking Korea? Or over Korea and Vietnam?
Korea and Vietnam.
Yeah, between the two.
Over 100,000 in those 2 wars died. So the Cold War, which was historians dubbed it the Cold War because we didn't get into a hot war with the Soviet Union, was actually a hot war in another sense.
Yeah.
Certainly for a lot of American families who lost their loved ones in those 2 wars.
Were you young? You weren't old enough to serve within the military itself, like, say, in the Second War or anything of that sort?
I was an infantry officer.
Oh, you were? I didn't realize that. Okay,
in the Pacific.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I was on a troop ship bound for Leyte when the atom bomb was dropped on August 6, 1945.
My Lord.
And I was tagged to become a platoon leader, leading a platoon or a company in the invasion of Japan.
Oh, my Lord. Your life may have been spared by Big Boy?
Yes. The bomb made... Well, I remember the troop ship was called Lydia Likes, and when we got the news that the bomb had been dropped, there were tremendous cheers aboard the troop ship because they were all infantrymen.
Yeah.
And all infantrymen scheduled for the tagged for the invasion of Japan.
Was it Japan or the main island, not Okinawa?
Well, it might have been Okinawa first, and then Japan. But in any case, instead of going to Japan, I spent the next 6 months on Leyte in the Philippines.
Yeah, it's interesting to me also, and it's apropos of something we're going to want to be talking, among other things, your being in Moscow at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. We want to get to that for sure.
Yes.
But the firebombing, as I understand it, of Tokyo was more destructive of human life than the atomic bomb itself. Firebombing in Dresden, it's a horrible business, a horrible ability to destroy human life that's become characteristic of the weapon systems in a new way that we should be existentially very significantly in touch with, don't you think? The destructiveness of the weapons of mass that have evolved within the geopolitical.
Well, Hiroshima alone, upwards of 200,000 people died as a consequence of that bomb.
Yeah.
But one of the devastating things about it, of course, the bomb signaled the opening of the nuclear warfare age, and now today we face the prospect that with nuclear proliferation, that a nuclear attack can come from any direction. Not only in war between nations, but there's a possibility of terrorists. And of course, today we have a conference among the great powers meeting in New York just today to see that they can take measures to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, they're trying to do the NPT. You think we can put that genie back in the bottle? We did with mustard gas in the first war. It was so terrible, right? And didn't we get it to where we were able to collectively to set up a regime where the weapons destructiveness that could be called into account in a normal war-making pattern was forestalled? Do you think we can do the same with the nuclear weapons? We're maybe getting ahead of the story here, but that's a big issue.
I think that's a possibility. Obama has committed himself to a nuclear-free world, that is, nuclear in the sense of weaponry. And I think the future of the world may very well depend upon the solution of that problem.
Well, do you think it? Yes, okay. One would want to take that position, certainly because the weapons are so ungodly powerful now. I wonder if we realize that, how powerful they are. We're going to want to talk about you in the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. One of the things that's featured in the book and so forth. It's just a general question that I have. I'm very concerned with. I want one last question along those lines, and we'll get on to the book. I'm sorry, but you're too interesting, and your life it should be a movie. It should be a movie by Steven Spielberg. I tell you, they couldn't get it, But in any case, the question that I'm wondering about. Did you read the book by Jonathan Schell, The Fate of the Earth?
Yes.
Was that something that made an impression on you, as it did on me? In very searing kind of detail when he spoke about the possibility of our ability to abolish our species? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes. There is a possibility of abolishing our species. if we go into an age of further proliferation of nuclear weapons, and that is only a step from germ warfare, and
that's very worrying,
and all the rest. But I'm encouraged by Obama taking the lead in coming to an agreement with
Russia.
Prime Minister Medvedev of Russia
1,500
in reduction of nuclear weapons to some extent in the major arsenals, and an effort to seek a nuclear-free world. And I'm encouraged because it has to be the United States that will to take the lead in order to bring that about.
Right.
And I'm somewhat hopeful that we'll make some progress in that direction.
Well, I'm very hopeful that your hopefulness is well taken because it's a central question confronting it.
I think we have to be hopeful. I mean, the alternative is so terrible.
It really is. End of civilization, certainly. And we're going to get to that. We're going to be talking about the Cuban thing that was just scared the daylights out of me, and it's in your book and so forth. But one last thing, in a sense, you were AP when you were there. When did you get involved with the Times and begin to work with the Times? Let's get that in order. And you became the managing editor.
I was with the AP for 10 years, and I must say that's a great organization, the AP. I left the AP to go to the Times with some reluctance. I was in Berlin at it was during the period of time around 1956 when Khrushchev was putting a squeeze on West Berlin, which was isolated, threatening to cut off the lifelines, the Autobahn, and so on, the connections to Germany. And after 3 years in Berlin, the Times, I was on leave in the United States, offered me a job. The understanding was that I would be going abroad for them.
Yes.
And I said, okay, I'll go abroad with you for you. But there's one thing, one thing I told him, was that I won't go to Moscow. Because at that time I had 4 kids.
Yes.
And I said, nobody has ever gone to Moscow with 4 kids.
Right.
So, of course, they sent me to Moscow with 4 kids.
Sounds like the Army.
Here I go.
and how was that experience? Was that good?
And
what year was that you did? Is that when you made your alliance with the New York Times in terms of your career?
That's right. I joined the Times in '56, and I went to Moscow as their chief Moscow correspondent in 1960.
Oh, really? 56 to 60. What were you doing between 56 and 60?
Between 56 to 60, I was in Berlin for the AP.
Oh, I see. For AP still.
That's right.
Okay, that was a big transition, or it was doing similar work and everything.
Yeah, I was doing similar work. Well, one of the reasons that they wanted to send me to Moscow was because I had had experience with the Chinese communist system.
Amazing,
I had experience in Berlin dealing again with the Russian threat on the city, and so they wanted someone at the Times who had a background in dealing with the communists and that sort of problem. So they sent me off to Moscow.
Yeah, and that's when the Cold War was still, as they say, was still in bloom, and the enemy du jour, as it were, in a certain sense, was communism and the Soviet Union and the Russia and the Chinese situation there. So George Kennan's containment was in full flower, and there was all this going on. So you went there, and how long were you in Moscow?
3 years.
3 years with the family.
With the family.
Girls went to school there, I understand.
You know, after I was in Moscow for about a year or so, I sent a letter to the managing editor of the New York Times, Clifton Daniel, and said, it's a good idea sending a correspondent with the family to Moscow because you're so isolated that the family creates an atmosphere, a milieu, which makes it possible to put up with all the pressures of living in Moscow.
Right, that could make sense.
Under constant surveillance and so on.
Right.
all of that pressure, and we had all kinds of things happening to us from a personal point of view. One of the funny things that happened that I often tell my friends about was we knew that we were under surveillance all the time.
Yeah.
Because our servants were, we were hired from a Russian agency. We knew that our car had listening devices. And then one day, Audrey and I went to bed in this tiny bedroom we had, and lighting fixture above the bed exploded, and there was a listening device in there, so they had
right in the bedroom. Yeah,
they had been listening some choice pillow talk.
Choice pillow talk. Huh?
Yeah, well, so it was pretty.
Yeah, that would be something.
Pretty lively time in Moscow.
Right. Well, you've been under the gun a lot in that sort of thing, and it was all during very harrowing times. We do have some photographs we're going to try and show. Do you have? You have some photographs. Well, no. Maybe we could preface it a little bit here, because you were in Moscow, as I mentioned, having had all that experience in China and in Vietnam, and watching that whole situation. I want to get some of your thoughts on it, historical perspective on your thoughts about it. You talk some about the Gulf of Tonkin resolution and some of these things in our foreign policy decision-making processes that we may want to get to at the end. Your thoughts on that. And you've been at a very responsible job being manager editor of the New York Times. But this thing that just swung into my mind is that you were in Moscow, and people will remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. I wonder if maybe you could lay that out. You were in Moscow there, and I also think we ought to start thinking about getting at some of the photographs that we can show. But can you explain your situation in that incredible moment when Khrushchev had brought all the atomic weapons into Cuba, and the world teetered on the edge of unleashing an ungodly exchange of deadly weaponry against each other and so forth? You were in Moscow then?
Yes. We're talking about, November 1962. It was a time when I can say to you that people in Moscow were absolutely paralyzed.
I think the whole world was.
With fear that there was going to be a nuclear war. And I remember during that whole period of time, on a day-to-day basis, when I was covering the exchanges between Washington and Moscow, at night I'd be going to the cable office to file. You had to go to the cable office because the censor was there. Everything had to go through censorship.
Okay.
And I just peek into where my kids were sleeping, and I think, my God, is there a possibility an American missile might be crashing through the roof of this
Mr. McNamara thought the same as he left the Pentagon one night. It's reported that he wondered whether there was going to be anything by a week from then. And they had gone to DEFCON 2.
Yeah.
They had 150,000 troops ready to invade Cuba. But maybe you could set it up in a journalistic kind of way for the remembrance, just how fateful that period of time was.
Well, the best way that I could describe it was, I think, the words that Nikita Khrushchev said to me. And this was on November 7th, 1962. It was the night that the Cuban Missile Crisis ended. That
was such a night. That was such an event.
Yeah.
Because they were on, if I understand, you were reporting and so forth, but they were right on the edge of having an absolute exchange. We had 17-to-1 ratio with our weapons of mass destruction. We were targeted. They had them all on air trigger alert, and they were ready, and people at all levels of consideration. It was like a high-stakes poker game that was being played between Mr. Khrushchev had smuggled all this stuff into Cuba, and they were ready to actually go and launch the weapons at one another. Is that not the case? People felt that way, even in the highest levels of responsibility.
That's the way people on the street in Moscow felt at that time, and of course people, I assume, in the United States.
And did you feel that? Can you remember?
I certainly felt that.
Yeah.
But just let me tell you about
Yes, okay.
November 7th, 1962, and that was the night that the Cuban Missile Crisis ended.
Thanks
and by a strange
God.
set of circumstances, I was in the Kremlin. My wife and I were in the Kremlin and had a chance to talk to Khrushchev. What had happened was...
Was it rare that you could speak to him? Such an exalted
no, this is
on the defining day.
This is on the day.
Right, I'm going to get to the book because we have a picture of that, so we want to get to some of these pictures. But go ahead, lay it out.
Yeah, what had happened was it was the 45th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution, and there was a reception in the Kremlin.
Okay.
And my wife Audrey and I were invited with a few other correspondents, and there were about 1,000 people, diplomats and so on. We walked in there, and there was Khrushchev and the members of the Politburo. And then something happened that sort of broke the ice for the whole reception. My wife, I saw her at the other end of the room. I was shocked and amazed when I saw that she went out in front, standing in front of Khrushchev.
Yeah, but wait a minute. Had they not taken cameras and such from the people as they went into the room as a security measure, and she just happened to have kept it in her bag? I mean,
absolutely.
It's worth mentioning. She was the only one with the camera.
She just ignored the instructions, so she reached into her handbag and took out this Leica, and I could see the KGB types closing in on her from all sides, and Khrushchev...
In that tension-ridden moment. Amazing.
Yeah, and Khrushchev waved them off, and he posed for her, and that broke the ice, and he left his position behind the table where he was swapping vodka toast with Brezhnev as number 2 and some of the other there, and caved down. When he came around from behind the table, I approached him, and he greeted me, and You
knew each other?
No. Really. I introduced myself and through an interpreter, and 2 or 3 other correspondents came up, and then he said to us words which became rather famous. He said to us, "Our rockets are out of Cuba, and except for the reason, the good reason that we showed, we came very, very close to a thermonuclear war." And
all out, with the major.
And if that had happened, we wouldn't be here.
There wouldn't be anything.
We wouldn't be here tonight.
What Johnny on the spot situation to have been in? We have a photograph in your book. Can we show?
This is one of the.
Give him time to come in.
This one over here.
That's on that very fateful day.
Yeah, that.
Was that taken by who?
That was taken by Audrey, my wife.
By Audrey, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's up in this corner. You can see Mr. Khrushchev.
Right, this is Khrushchev, and he's talking to the man in the center is Leonid Brezhnev, who was the number 2 and who eventually ousted in 1964 Khrushchev from power.
Khrushchev
took power himself.
Khrushchev took a hit for having made that decision because he did not. He was thought as being weak on capitalism or something.
No, I think he was.
Keep it on the picture, please.
I think the Politburo and anything else thought that he had been too reckless, taking too many chances. They didn't approve of some of his economic policies, and so they decided to get rid of him. And Leonid Brezhnev, the man in the center, took over.
Power, yeah, right. You were there at that very crucial moment.
Yes.
And your wife Audrey was there with her Leica.
Yeah, she took that
picture. To get a
picture.
record of it. It's a historic picture. I was going to want to show that. We're on this page.
Incidentally,
there's a picture of you with Fidel Castro. Maybe
incidentally, that picture,
ties in.
Before we get away from that, that picture and the other pictures that she took were on the front page of the New York Times.
Wow.
The next morning.
Oh yeah, I would have thought so. What a coup! What a coup! Yeah, that was really good. And then you did meet Mr. Castro.
Yeah, I met him in 1983.
83, a long time after. He was furious when that thing took place. He actually wanted to have the weapons unleashed, did he? Or
no, he didn't want to have the weapons unleashed, but he wanted a better a deal. He wanted the boycott of Cuba by the United States ended. He wanted Guantanamo closed. And Guantanamo evacuated by American soldiers. He wanted all of those things.
And a promise never to invade, as they had at Bay of Pigs.
Well, there was a promise that made by President Kennedy that the United States would not again attempt to invade Cuba, but Castro didn't buy it. He didn't believe in it.
Yeah, right. But that was the most hair-raising moment that I can recall in my life.
Yeah.
And that was it. And you were there right on the spot, as it were.
Well, you know, I asked Castro why he was, tied up so closely to the Russians, to the extent that he was willing to give them bases.
Yeah.
And what he said was, after my revolution, when I took power, I needed help. I needed support. I needed economic support. All of those things. And the United States wouldn't give it to me. So I turned to the Russians, the Soviet Union, and I'm grateful for the support they gave me.
Yeah, right.
And up to that time, he was getting billions of dollars or rubles in support from the Russians, subsidy.
Right. All of that. It's been a major part of the evolving geopolitical, view of the world and developments within the world and so forth. It seems to me you've been Johnny on the spot. You were there with Vietnam and reported from Vietnam.
That's right. Yeah.
And what was your take as you were there on that war effort that was being done? I know you have reference in the book to Tonkin resolution that was not correct. We were led into it. Also, there was some better decision-making that might have been done by some of the generals with Mr. MacArthur and so forth, even over Korea and so forth. What's your overall take on the validity of the decision-making process about our leadership going to war over these last 50 years that you've been covering things?
Well,
we could maybe get to Iraq and Afghanistan before the end of the hour. Yeah.
Sure. Vietnam was a terrible mistake, and it never should have happened. When I arrived in Vietnam in February of 1950.
50, ladies and gentlemen.
1950. It was at that point that Harry Truman took the decision to support the French and to recognize the puppet government of Bao Dai.
He took that decision in 50.
He took that decision
in 1950.
Yeah.
Before
so
54.
that was the.
And that's what tied us in 54 when Dien Bien Phu fell.
Well, to get back to Dien Bien Phu was later on in
1954.
In 1954, but to get back to 1950, that was the point at which Truman took the first decision in support of the French, which led us into our own war. But at that point, Truman received 8 appeals from Ho Chi Minh to come to an understanding for cooperation if Truman would assist Vietnam in the step-by-step process that we used in granting independence to the Philippines to have Vietnam become independent from French colonialism. And Truman never answered any one of those 8 appeals.
What
he ignored
thinking?
them.
Was he thinking George Kennan, communism, amoeba coming out from the Eurasian landmass, containment, that kind of thing? Communism, it was communism, not nationalism, or on his part, and then succeeding, you know, with.
No, it was a deal with the French. It was a deal with de Gaulle. In return for support by the United States of NATO, and in the policy, developing policy after World War II with Germany. That we would give support to the French colonialism in Vietnam. And Dean Acheson,
yes,
who was Truman's Secretary of State, described those negotiations. And finally, when he wrote his memoir, and he said, we were blackmailed into going into Vietnam, because the long and the short of that de Gaulle never came through with the kind of support that was needed for NATO and German policy at all. So that was the beginning of it, and then step by step we got further and further into that tragedy until our defeat in 1975.
It took 1975. I think it was recognized before that. It took that long to get a negotiated peace with honor. Peace with honor.
By 1975.
You were up on the border with Cambodia, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Dangerous conditions.
Yeah.
You've been Johnny on the spot so much of the time at the major events rolling this world over these past years.
Well, I
wonder if you realize that
during my job as a correspondent.
Yes, sir. You're doing a very, very good job. The whole family was.
Yeah.
And one of the problems is in television we don't have enough time, and I wonder if maybe we could. First of all, let me just show this quick. This is a book we've done before. Let's let them see this. This is a book that preceded the recent book that's just out now.
That was 1905.
This was 2000.
2005.
2005. This is a major book. We did a program on that in the past that goes over this stuff in Southeast Asia and so forth. Great book. And then just to get that done. And then I wonder if maybe we could. You brought in a number of photographs.
Yeah.
And maybe we could hold them up and talk to some of these photographs, what they are,
okay.
just so that we to make sure we get them in with the visual.
Okay.
component. I think Audrey would like it that we're showing some photographs.
Yeah. Okay.
Of,
this is.
I can hold them.
Okay, that's a photograph from 1950, and with the French Foreign Legion, I went up in convoy up onto the border between North Vietnam and China, and I went up there with 2 correspondents. Famous correspondents. One is that's me on the right in the ridiculous white shoes.
Let's say,
which is not exactly, which is not exactly, white shoes is not exactly the approved shoes for foreign correspondents.
Gosh, and, you've always been so handsome, huh? No wonder. Yeah, okay, go on.
And on my right is Carl Meidens, the famous life photographer who filmed MacArthur in 1944 going ashore in Leyte, and the
commander of the post.
The commander officer of the post is next to Carl, and then there's Wilson Fielder. Wilson Fielder, I must tell you about him, a heroic young Time correspondent. He left. He left me, and I went on alone on a French convoy, and he went to Korea to cover the war there, and he was killed in the battle for Daejeon. And Carl went searching for his body and found it outside of a village where he had been shot while the fighting was going on between American and Korean forces.
The life of a correspondent on the cutting edge or the front edge of things is a very hard-won stories that are done, because there's great danger often involved in what you're doing. I wonder if we appreciate it.
Yeah, well, that's
we saw this photograph before, but that's you with Mr. Castro, right?
Yeah, and that's Bill Kovich. When I was managing editor at the time, Bill Kovich was on the desk of the Times. He was called our enterprise editor, and a very, very able reporter indeed.
Mm-hmm. And what was your position then? What was your position?
When I met Castro, I was managing editor, and I was going through South America on a tour of our bureaus to see how they were getting along, how our correspondents were getting along.
Okay, that gave you another level of responsibility, being a managing editor as well.
Yeah, basically I was number 2 at the time. The top guy was Abe Rosenthal, who was executive editor. As managing editor, I ran the news operation.
Okay, big responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Should we show another? These are bouncing around in time.
Oh yeah.
But we just want to get them in.
This is.
Maybe you want to come back a little on that.
Yeah, this is a photo of 1971. I interviewed Zhou Enlai.
Wow.
The Prime Minister of China. And it was an important interview because during that interview, Zhou Enlai for the first time came out with a policy of peaceful attraction of Taiwan back to the mainland. Up until that time, there had been the belief that the communists would militarily try to take Taiwan.
It's still an important issue, the difference between the Chinese.
Yes, it is,
and Taiwan.
but it's eased considerably, and this peaceful attraction may be working now.
I'm glad you helped bring that about, sir.
What?
You helped bring this about as well by doing the interview with him and informing the people.
It was the first interview in which Zhou Enlai voiced that policy, yes.
Okay, good. Well, let's go to another photograph. Now, this one is
you got that one upside down.
But this goes back into an earlier part of your career, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe you could do that. Is that you mounted? You're the equestrian here?
Yeah, that was me sometime in the Army before I went overseas into the Pacific.
Okay, and you would have been a young man then, right?
Yeah, when I got my commission as a second lieutenant at Fort Benning, I was 21 years old.
Okay, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're just going to get these photographs in. And this is...
Oh, you got it.
Got it this way?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, this is...
This is a photograph of me running around in the newsroom of the New York Times, managing things. Yeah. When I was managing editor, and I was managing editor there for 10 years.
Wow.
I retired as managing editor in 1987.
But that was a whole nother level of responsibility. You were responsible for the news.
Yes, but my happiest, most interesting days was when I was foreign editor of the paper from '60 to '63, when I was dealing with foreign affairs and the correspondence abroad, where I had responsibility for working with 40 correspondents of the New York Times all over the world.
You have a soft spot in your heart for the foreign correspondents that go out on the line.
Very much so.
Yes, sir. I can understand
so.
why.
Yes.
I can understand why, because you've trod that path, right? What do we got here?
This is a chilly prospect. This is 1947 with a bunch of correspondents. We were covering the war in the Chinese Civil War in Manchuria.
What year now?
We're talking about 1947, and that was the period of time when Mao began to achieve his victory in the Civil War, because one of his generals, Lin Biao, defeated the nationalists in Manchuria. And after that, Lin Biao descended down into North China and eventually all the way down to Nanking, which they occupied in April of 1949.
Is this before the Long March?
Oh, yeah, the Long March
Long
was...
before. That's what it's hard to get at. You were on the spot at the gestation of these major events along the course of world history.
I'm long in the tooth, but not that far. The Long March is 1934.
No, but it's called Johnny on the spot in a certain sense of your life. I don't know how it happened, but you seem to have been in amazing circumstances and so forth. Must have taken a lot of initiative on your part. It must have been very exhilarating, and it must have been a very exciting kind of situation to lead such a crucial kind of lifestyle that you were reporting back to the people.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you the most exciting and most important moment for me as a correspondent.
Yes, sir.
There's no photograph of it,
okay.
But it was on and probably one of the most historic moments in history, and that was. The date was January 7th, 1949. I'd crossed the lines to and joined the communist armies marching south, and I was picked up by communist guerrillas.
You were a prisoner, weren't you, for a while?
Yeah, and I was a prisoner at that point in that in a peasant hut on that date, and it was that date. The hut was alongside of the battlefield where 300,000 of Mao's troops had surrounded 130,000 nationalist troops.
Yeah,
And that morning the artillery fire stopped, and I knew that the nationalists had surrendered. And that moment, which was the end of the Battle of the Huaihai, was a battle in which in 65 days the communists knocked out 500,000 nationalist troops.
Holy mackerel.
And that was the culmination of the Civil War. And it was with that victory that Mao Zedong put down the foundation on which the new China, the China we see today, is built.
There's been considerable, do you think there's been considerable change in China in the more recent experience after Mao, after Cultural Revolution, and all the things that followed, and Deng Xiaoping and that sort of thing? And China's emerging now as a very, very major power in the world. Are you surprised by the direction it's taken, or after Mr. Nixon went and so forth? Or maybe you would understand these major things that were rolling the earth from your position of having been on the ground, as it were, in that part of the world. But China.
It's not surprising to me at all that we see China today as emerging as one of the great powers. And as a matter of fact, China today is successfully challenging the United States as the most influential and powerful country in East Asia. But you're not surprised when you get to know the Chinese people. They're intelligent.
Yes.
They're ambitious. They're hardworking, energetic, and as such, they've moved up. Economically, they're getting stronger every day. The only disappointment up to this point is we haven't had more of the democratic reforms which the government years ago promised the Chinese people. But I'm rather optimistic that a measure of greater democracy will come along in the next year, and China will become, in that sense, governed by the rule of law and more enlightened. But she still has a long way to go.
Do you think there's still is there still relevance to dialectical materialism and Marxism? They try to preach as a state religion, but it's gone.
Marxism, Leninism, and dialectical materialism, all of that is out of the window.
Dustbin of history.
Yeah, it's
in China, you say, or in general in the world.
Well, I think in general in the world, but certainly in China, you don't have today in China an absolute. As far as the economy is concerned, you don't have an absolute free market. What you have is, to some extent, a free market, but you have an authoritarian, state-run economy.
State capitalism, would it be called? Some people call it Stalin.
Yes, very, very close to a form of state capitalism, but on a certain level, a certain degree, certainly, of free market. And the success of it is shown by today the Chinese are holding almost $900 billion in the United States.
Yeah, all our T-bills.
Treasury.
Yes, indeed.
In their reserves. So they've done very well.
Yeah, they've done very well. They're growing very quickly.
Hopefully, they'll continue to do well, and hopefully it'll be in partnership with the United States.
Okay, I take that as a matter then that we have, let's say if we have, you and I grew up, or you a bit longer than me, but I also in an era where there was a conflict between our system and communism. That was the big enemy thing that we had then, and it seems to have imploded in the Soviet Union. It seems to have been co-opted in China. So that leaves us with this, the capitalist system. Francis Fukuyama wrote a book some time ago saying it's the end of history because there was a conflict that was going on and the good guys, that being us, won. And that we have control over the operation of what Bucky Fuller would have called Spaceship Earth. We have that. I wonder what your thoughts are in terms of the basic assumptions by which the planet is operating now. And it might do with some reference to, we might have some reference to our current foreign policy. And it seems the enemy du jour seems to be emerging in the minds of the Western world as Islam, or of the Arab and the Islamic world, and that would focus on Iraq, the war in Iraq, what's going on in Afghanistan now, and a lot of the saber rattling or bunker busting bomb threats to Iran about their building a nuclear capability and so forth. What are your thoughts on along those lines?
We are. I think we are in a very difficult situation right now. We have enormous problems. I think our greatest problems are possibly in problems of nuclear proliferation and the dangers that stemmed from that, the threats there, which touches upon terrorism and some of the problems we're having with militant Islamic militants, so-called jihadists. We have enormous problems as far as the pollution is concerned of the earth, as illustrated by what's happening now in the Gulf of Mexico with the oil spill. We have still not mastered the problem of AIDS, of global warming, of all of these things. So I think the challenge to us now is the need under the banner of so-called globalization to come closer together and meet these threats. And if we don't meet these threats, I feel a great deal of sadness for our grandchildren and our great grandchildren. I don't think that the problem that we have now with certain militant sections of the Muslim world are our worst problem. It's something that has to be dealt with, and I think with an intelligent policy by the United States, with the solution of such problems as the problem of Palestine and the relationship of Israel with the Palestinians.
Not to mention Kashmir.
And that we can with the solution of that problem and similar problems, we can move forward.
Mm-hmm. So
that's a pretty broad sweeping
well,
statement.
it was a broad sweeping assessment of the world.
Yeah.
And so forth. We still have weapons systems. We were talking earlier about the Cuban Missile that were considered to be species lethal in terms of their. Do you think that still holds in terms of a capability? The weapon systems that exist, if they were to be unleashed.
Well, I think
or can we put that genie back in the bottle? Well, we haven't been able to very well out of historical.
You know, not entirely. And of course, this conference, which is going on
right now,
here,
as we speak, yes,
on trying to control nuclear proliferation is absolutely crucial, and the policies that will be adopted by the great powers, and that. To that degree, will determine whether or not we'll have, you know, a secure world. Mm-hmm. I think it's crucial for us to come to a universal agreement on control of proliferation of these weapons, and if necessary, apply the sanctions that have to be applied to keep states like Iran and North Korea under control.
Okay. The capability that we have, the system that's in place, the financial markets, the whole world after September 2008 was roiled. And we've gone through a huge thing that made many people bring into question, is the economic order, are the basic assumptions by which we organize our society, many people see it's not elementally just in terms of the masses of the world. It's small groups of people who have tremendous control, influence, and power over financial and political decision-making and so forth, as it seems always there has been. Do you think there's a new system that is required, that perhaps the future requires, that we don't seem to have the outline for? Or I'm just wondering, do you think we can just move ahead in the way we're going, and that we can, in a certain sense, the British would say, muddle through? Or is there a need for what Mr. Bush Sr. used to deride, the vision thing, for something new that is equally existentially taking into account a capability that we have at the design level or at the capability side, as we do with weapons, that is required in order to lay us on with the future? Or how do you feel? Well, it's a broad, general question, your sensing of things from your long experience.
Well, if we're taking the example of the United States, I think the system that we have now is basically good.
Okay.
We have certain defects are evident in the great divide between the rich and the poor, the problems we've had with the health system, the financial problems, and so on. But there's one thing that's great about this country, and that is that it has a capability for self-correction.
Yes.
And I think that's what's going forward. I mean, we
have
Wall Street running amok.
Yeah. You write on a computer, or how do you put it together? How did you put this together?
2 years of hard work.
Oh, it makes it seem so easy.
No, but you know, I had the great advantage in putting this book together of having a lot of my files and notebooks, and also my wife's photographs, and also she's a writer. She's produced several books of her own.
Yeah.
And putting it all together with contributions from from my daughters, including Leslie, who helped me in my research. We got the book out.
It's a heck of a good book. Congratulations.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay.